Ideas are mysterious. For some, they seem to pop up out of nowhere, these intangible things that point us in any direction. But how do they come to us? Are we doomed to wait for them to pop up, relegated to the sidelines in our pursuit for novelty and newness? Or is there something we can do, something tangible, to place the ethereal in our physical hands? Perhaps inspiration and motivation rear their ugly heads once again, though. Motivation ducks back into its hole, but inspiration sits there like a tempestuous whack-a-mole, and we stare on, knowing that if we do so much as move toward it or even blink, it will duck back into the abyss and be forever lost to us. However, we are not condemned to such a situation. Ideas can be found hanging like fruit upon a tree, but they can also be planted, tended, and grown into what we desire, though patience is always required. Well, my name is Zach, and welcome to episode 82 of the podcast. This was supposed to be part of the last episode, but here we are. So today we will be touching upon strategies for coming up with ideas in the first place. And if you're looking for help overcoming the hurdles of such a thing, take a look at the last episode of the podcast, which will be linked below. The drawing you are watching unfold here is one of my drawings from March of the Robots 2025, and the prompt was park. As you can see, my idea shifted a bit from the original prompt, and I started thinking about legs, about something that would have so many different ways to park in a particular location. And this strange amalgamation is what came out, just so you have some context for what's happening behind the scenes here. Well, I'm going to call this first section Idea Conjuring, mostly because it sounds magical and cool, but also because that's a good way to think about it. Coming up with ideas is somewhere between being creative, being inspired, working hard, revisiting old tricks, and just being lucky. Some of those you can control and others you cannot. So obviously, I'm going to be focusing on the parts you can control. That's where the productivity and efficiency lies. What follows is going to be some methods that I have seen work either for myself, my students, my colleagues, or other professionals over the years. If you have any to share, whether covered here or otherwise, I would love to hear about them in the comments below. And with that, let's first take a look at some mindset components before we dive into the specific methodologies. The first of these is somewhere between a mindset, a philosophical standpoint, and an actual strategy in and of itself. And this is simply throw nothing out. What this is really talking about is being careful not to disqualify an idea before you ever give it the chance to bloom or to blossom into something else. Most of us do this. Anyone who is creative in any fashion, you go to write a sentence, you go to start a drawing, you go to look up references or find a picture of a tree to work from for your painting, and you go, that won't work. And then you move on to the next thing. And this happens almost unconsciously. It perhaps happens a little less often with those latter things, but especially if you're working on something like telling a story, whether in artwork or literally writing. There are so many potential ideas that pop up that it can be so easy to just write them off, to throw out those ideas before you ever give them the chance to develop into something else. You can notice this if you've ever worked on rough drafts or on outlines, or if, like me, you went to school at some point and had to do innumerable sketches before you started on an actual project. But for most people, this is probably something you don't even notice that you do. This occurred a lot when I talked to my students. I would give them the prompt or the idea for a project, and then of course I would give them maybe 5 or 10 minutes to start thinking about it before I would go around and have conversations with each one about what they were thinking. And for so many students, they would take one of two paths. They would either dive straight into something without thinking about it at all, or they would be sitting there in self-doubt, unsure of how to proceed. Sometimes this was because they literally had no ideas, but frequently it was because they doubted the ideas they had come up with. They might have come up with an idea that felt too simple, but instead of sitting there and holding on to it and thinking about it for a time or building off of it, they would just put it on a shelf in their mind or throw it away. And this is exactly what I'm talking about here. Most of us come up with ideas, but we can train ourselves to let go of them quickly, to disqualify them, to assume that they're not as good as we thought. Sometimes this comes from insecurities. Maybe people in your life have not been particularly supportive or encouraging, and so you just don't assume that you can come up with a good idea. Maybe you've had some actual bad ideas in the past. Or maybe your skills don't quite support what you're trying to accomplish. But the big thing here, the overarching mindset, is be really careful not to exclude ideas. If you are struggling to come up with ideas, or maybe you're not, maybe you're like me and you have plenty of ideas, but still you want more because we're, kind of greedy that way. I will write and build things and draw until I have no breath left in me. And so I am never going to, have too many ideas. But even for me, I try to be careful because I understand that most ideas can grow into something if they're given the time of day, if they're given a chance, if they're given some fertilizer, if they're given space. And each idea needs a different thing. But if you're not careful at the beginning of this process and you dismiss them, you throw them away, you are going to put yourself in a situation where you might have had a dozen ideas that could have been turned into something, and now you've got one. Or worse, you have none because you've excluded all of them. So just be very careful. If coming up with ideas is a struggle for you, or even if it's not, but you would like to have more, be very careful about your mindset and make sure you aren't throwing out your ideas before you ever gave them the chance. The next aspect of the mindset that I want to talk about is expanding your references and resources. This can actually be a methodology that you do, but it kind of spans that gap, and that's why I have it here first. So change what you take in the world. If you are searching for ideas, you long to have more of them, then expand what you're taking in. Sometimes this can be going out and actually exploring the natural world that is around you. I've talked a lot on this channel about the importance for artists to get outside. Not just because there's a stereotype about us sitting inside in the basement and working at 4 a.m, which does seem to happen for a lot of us, but also because our hobbies and our skills are developed almost always inside and alone. This is just how it works. I don't like drawing outside, partially because I can't record when I do that, but I don't like the wind pushing at my paper. I don't like it when a bug lands on my sketchbook. I don't like that the light source changes all the time. And I would imagine many of you are similar, that you work on your paintings or drawings inside. Maybe you work on digital art or on sculpture of some kind, and you really have to do it in an enclosed and protected space. And if that's the case, it's all the more important for us with our particular interests to get outside. But in this particular mindset thing, we're referring to taking in different inputs. If you are going out and going for a walk when that is not a normal part of your day, and maybe you're not listening to a music or a podcast or something like this, but you're just observing, you are naturally going to take in more inputs. Our ideas are always going to come from the things that we ingest as human beings. Not hopefully your food, but the ideas and concepts that you ingest. If you have a tendency to only rewatch the same kind of TV shows or movies, if you expand that, maybe things in the same genre, maybe terribly different genres, that is also going to expand your resources, the information that's coming in. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I certainly have. When I lock into a particular type of thing, like a video game. I grew up playing mostly Nintendo games, and they have a very particular aesthetic to them. So when I started playing Monster Hunter, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of the aspects, the visual storytelling of those games started to come into my artwork because once again, I was getting all of these dragons and dinosaurs coming into my brain that I had left in my childhood. And of course, I realized I love them. I've always loved them, and I just forgot for a time. And when I play science fiction games like Armored Core 6, then I start working more on robots and things like that. Those video games, though they can be a time sink and they can take you away from your artwork, can also be a source of inspiration. So much of my reading time the last couple of years has been dedicated toward fantasy. Lord of the Rings in particular. I've read the entire trilogy twice in the last year, mostly because it's my happy place. And I'm working through the Silmarillion really slowly. I also read The Hobbit last year as well. And all of that influences the way I write, but it influences my world building. I've been doing a lot more sketches in my world building sketchbook and more things here on the channel. That's because the resources and the references, the material and other media that I'm absorbing has changed. And thus my art is getting a fresh infusion of new ideas. So I would encourage you to do that. If you want to expand the amount of ideas that you're able to come up with, make sure you vary the inputs that you're taking in. Try reading novels of a different kind. Try playing new video games. Try getting outside or going on little, weekend getaways. Even if you can't afford to stay somewhere, maybe you can just walk through an environment that you don't normally run into. Here in Colorado, spring is upon us, and so it is now time for me to start going and exploring all of the thawing things. I'm going to be going up into the mountains and trying to find mushrooms and all the wildflowers. We've got tulips and daffodils that are bursting through the ground and grape hyacinth here in the backyard. I love all those things. They're beautiful in their own right, but they're also good for storytelling, for world building, and for idea generation. So I would encourage you, whatever your normal is, if you desire to come up with more and better ideas, vary the inputs from the rest of your life. The last thing here with the mindsets is just alleviate the pressure on yourself. Don't expect an idea to be good or bad. Don't expect anything. When you put yourself in a situation where your goal is, your desire is to come up with ideas, have the success, the victory qualifications be, I came up with X amount of ideas, or maybe I just came up with ideas. If you put pressure on yourself to come up with good ideas, story ideas, a new idea for a character, a new idea for a book, whatever it might be, there is a failure condition there. If you failed to hit whatever you were trying to, then it's been a failure. It was unsuccessful. And if you alleviate that pressure on yourself when you're trying to come up with ideas, you're going to find that it's easier to let the ideas flow. Psychologically, part of your brain will prohibit you from coming up with ideas that it has already thrown out, things that it deems might not be up to snuff. And so if you are able to pull back on that, be gracious with yourself, and alleviate that pressure, you'll probably find that it's easier to let those ideas flow. Sometimes this can be making jokes about it. Sometimes it could be turning it into a game and doing it with some friends, just trying to come up with ideas. In fact, if you do have friends, though this will span into kind of the strategies section, you could just sit there and give each other like 1 or 2 prompts, and you have 5 minutes, and your goal is to come up with an idea for a painting, an idea for a drawing, an idea for world building something, whatever you can do there. But the big thing here is to try to alleviate that pressure on yourself, the pressure that says you have to come up with an idea, or you're a bad artist, or you're not very creative if you don't. Be gracious with yourself and alleviate that pressure. Well, let's move into some methods, some actual strategies here, now that we're almost 13 minutes into this video. The first thing that I want to talk about, though, and I actually added this last because it occurred to me as I was kind of skimming through my outline, is try. Yes, this sounds really, really trite and mundane, but the first thing that you need to do when you're trying to come up with ideas is to simply try to come up with ideas. Don't assume that they will pop out of the ground, that they will just show up, that inspiration will come out of nowhere and strike you. Try to come up with ideas. Don't assume that you can't come up with ideas. Don't assume anything. Just put in effort and try. It is incredibly hard to start from a blank canvas, from a blank page. If you sit down and you are not used to coming up with ideas, it can be really intimidating, really daunting to do so. But the reality is you're not going to get better at this if you don't put time into attempting. You'll learn more about yourself. So, what kind of art do you do? That's going to be the place you're going to have to start, is thinking about what kind of art you do. And this is the best place to start because you're not starting from zero. If you open that sketchbook page or you look at a blank canvas and you grab your utensils and then try to do something, it's very, very, very difficult. So take a look at the last couple pieces that you've done if you don't know what to go with at all, and springboard off of that. The last couple paintings I worked on was 2 small acrylic paintings. One was a beetle and one was a moth. For my next paintings, I'm planning on doing more of these bugs because I just love them and I think they're exciting. And those were springboarding off of the birds that I did prior and other animals that I did prior. I have started to work on these cradle boards because I enjoy the flat texture of them a lot more than working on canvas. They're really easy to hang, so there's a couple of things that have kind of pointed me in that direction, but I kind of just keep going. I keep pushing and seeing what's going to happen next. A lot of times when I work on my drawings, like the one you're watching happen here, there was a prompt for that. This was March of the Robots, so A, it has to be a robot, and then there's a word associated. Sometimes that's how I go about coming up with my ideas, is basically shirking some of the duty onto something else. And if you struggle to come up with ideas, there's nothing wrong with taking someone else's idea from something like that, like Inktober or Smogist or March of the Robots. Or if you want to join our Discord server, I have weekly prompts up there that are just some ideas for things for you to draw from. You're not going to get graded or evaluated on them, but if you struggle to come up with ideas, sometimes the best thing to do is just snag something like that. Take someone else's idea and work from it. You almost have to be working in order to be in a mindset, in a place where you can take on new ideas, where you can be able to conjure them. And so the first piece of encouragement is either to look back at whatever you've been working on recently and just continue to expand on that and allow it to evolve as you move forward, or grab some prompts and just get started. Once you're working, it's far, far easier. But the big thing, all of this is under that overarching heading of try. Don't assume that ideas will just pop out of nowhere. And again, I added this later on because sometimes I've been in arts for so long that sometimes I skip over the real fundamental stuff, and that's not a good thing. And so I wanted to add this here. So if you really struggle with coming up with ideas, have you ever sat down and just tried to come up with ideas? And if you have, and it's been difficult, I am sorry. But I hope these little quick suggestions will help, and let's move on into some other strategies that can kind of help whether you're at the beginning or you're somewhere in the middle or you're maybe a little bit more advanced. Write everything down. You can come back to things later with a different and distant mindset and sift through all of those pieces. Sometimes you find gold, and sometimes you find pieces that can be put together like Legos. So when I say write everything down, if you are an artist, there's a possibility that you don't write much when it comes to your work. If you've been a part of this channel for any amount of time, you've noticed that I make notes on a lot of my drawings. Not always on these kind of sketchbook sessions. You don't see them when I'm working on finished pieces, but especially in the world building sessions. I take notes concerning what's working and what's not working. But I also write down any new cool ideas. I have an iPhone, and on that I've got the Notes app. And on there I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 notes. Not all of them are for art. There's a lot of them that are for art, for writing, and for music, but those are predominantly what they are. Probably 85 to 90% of the notes on there are for those three arenas. When I have an idea for something, I don't trust myself to hold on to it. And again, I work on not dismissing ideas. So I've got a couple rounds of notes that I will just open my phone and I will put something in there. I actually had to do this earlier today when I was driving home from getting some groceries. Now, don't freak out, I wasn't texting or typing on my phone, but what I did was instead, I opened up the voice recording and I hit that, and I can do that and still keep my eyes on the road entirely and be safe. And I recorded my thoughts onto a note. This allows me, wherever I am, whether I'm driving, I'm on an airplane, I'm outside going for a walk, or I'm, more than likely just sitting on a couch somewhere, I have the ability to write down or to record any idea that comes to me. This allows me to have a backup when I have those days where I haven't come up with an idea or I need something. And that's a really lovely thing. It's good to have a place to go back to, someplace you can go mine your own ideas from. So I would recommend every single time you come up with an idea, if you're out with your friends and one of them suggests something, or you just are, you're in the middle of eating your sandwich at lunch and you come up with something, write it down. Don't trust yourself to remember it. Don't toss out any idea. Any idea is okay, but start writing things down. Maybe this will be notation in your sketchbook itself. Maybe it'll be on the side of your digital art piece, but I would actually recommend that whatever device you have with you all the time, which for most of us, like 99% of us, that's a phone. There's a good chance you're listening to this on a phone right now. But if it's not, if you have a purse or you have a backpack with a tiny little notebook in there, write down your ideas. You will be thankful that you did this. Because sometimes, even if it's only 10% of the time, one of those ideas is going to come back to you. It's going to be something that is beneficial. And sometimes the act of writing it down can actually help to cement it in your mind. So write every idea down. Don't assume that you'll remember them for later. The next thing is actually to practice literally coming up with ideas. I know I mentioned try earlier. This is a little bit different. I participated in an activity in high school called Odyssey of the Mind. It was a lot of different things, but the one part that I want to focus on right now is we had this portion of it where you were given an idea, a concept, or a problem to solve, and you had to come up with as many solutions as you could in a controlled amount of time. This might be uses for a paperclip. It might be uses for a pen. These were practices that allowed us to literally practice coming up with ideas. And this is something that I would recommend for you artistically as well. So think about it in terms of a project. Let's say you're working on a self-portrait. Let's say that's like our concept, our idea here, right? I want you to try to list out 10 or 20 different ways that you could represent yourself in a self-portrait. If you want to literally pause the video and try this, go ahead. That wasn't necessarily my intent, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. Now, right off the top of my head, if I was going to do something as simple as that, I might think about, well, I could draw myself sitting here like I am right now. Maybe I could draw myself making a funny face. Maybe I could take a picture of myself from when I was a child and have like the piece warp across until I turn into me as I am today. Maybe I could have a younger version of myself and an older version of myself talking to each other in the same piece. Maybe I could draw myself as an animal. Maybe I could draw myself as a list of things that I'm interested in, like amorphously put together in a surrealistic environment. Maybe I could draw myself as a robot by having the actual pieces of me, symbolically embody what I'm about and who I am. Maybe I could draw myself as a monster and all of the bad things about me I could illustrate. Maybe I could draw myself as a planet. What would I look like as a planet? All of this was just me coming up with ideas randomly. None of this is scripted right here. And these kind of activities are things that I practiced growing up, I practiced when I was teaching, and I still practice today. These strategies are really good to hone the skill of coming up with ideas, because that's what it is. It is a skill. Creativity can be developed. You can learn how to better come up with ideas. So actually dedicate time to coming up with ideas, to practicing it. If you are a painter, consider taking a look at the kinds of things that you paint. What are the possible ways to solve that? Let's say that you're painting a bald eagle. Well, is it going to work best if the bald eagle is in the center of your piece? What does the background look like? Does the background have to be realistic? Could it be some other color? Could you prime the canvas in violet or pink or orange and then put the blue sky over top so you get different vibrant colors showing out? Should it be one bald eagle or multiple? Do you want it to be the foreground or the background so people focus on it? Is the piece going to look better if it has any other elements? If you do the eagle really realistic, how would a surrealistic background be? Maybe an abstract background, a postmodern one, maybe something that just has a lot of impasto. Oh, speaking of which, do you want to have the feathers actually have physical texture with your oil or acrylic paint? That way they'll catch light and they will, give you different shadows from how the paint overlaps itself. All of these would be ideas that you can work on coming up with for a painting. But if you're world building, something like that can get even crazier. You sit there and start thinking about a city where these people live and you go, well, if they have magic, how could they solve all the normal things that you would do in life with magic? So walk yourself through your day. You wake up in the morning. Could there be a magical alarm clock? Does a robot of some kind or some magical elemental being pull the bed back? Does it put the bed back? Can you use time magic to rewind things so that the bed goes back to the way it was? If you wake up and brush your teeth, what about going to the bathroom? In Harry Potter, they just use magic originally before they had the plumbing systems to just vanish their poo, which is really, really odd. But you can work on solving those things. Who cooks breakfast? Is it elves? Does it just appear? Do you conjure it? Do you 3D print it because it's a science fiction thing? You can roll with world building ideas like this till kingdom come. There's so many places you can go. And sometimes it's just practicing like that. It's starting with the mundane. I do a lot of this in my own world building, where I try to think about, this is the environment, what kind of animals would live there? And I can go find them in our world, but then it's way more fun to just be like, okay, well, I need a grazer. Let's make something a grazer here that wouldn't be. I created these reptilian wolves for the chapter I'm working on right now, and they're really cool and intimidating. And literally, the last sentence I wrote last night was one of these things creeping right next to some of our protagonists, and they could smell it, and it's got this mix of fur and claws, and it's gonna be cool. I'm gonna have to illustrate the thing at some point, which is gonna be terribly intimidating, but it'll also be fun. But the thing here is practice coming up with ideas. If you really want to get better at coming up with ideas, give yourself time set aside specifically to do that. What about journaling? Writing and forcing yourself to do things will often provide you with some direction. A lot of people really love journaling. I want to love journaling. I'm not good at it. It's good for me every time I do it. I can't seem to maintain a desire to do it. And because it's not something I'm doing for work, then it's something I don't stick to. And generally, like, I'll pull up my journal and be like, oh, cool, it's been 6 months since I wrote something in here. I'm sure that if I built the habit, I could do it. But for some people, it's a really wonderful thing to do. If you journal about your art specifically, you will often sort through things. As you write, a different part of your brain is processing things. And this can be a really wonderful and beneficial thing for coming up with ideas. Sometimes this might work better for storytelling elements if you're trying to put together a book, a world building project, a comic of some kind, but it can also work for other art as well. Especially if you spend some time in your day kind of absorbing other people's artwork and dissecting it and thinking about it, then journaling can often be a way to manage that. But this journaling doesn't have to be just writing. It could be sketching. You could sort through and sift through ideas by drawing things, drawing your feelings, drawing your thoughts, drawing your emotions, drawing a dozen different versions of what a thing could look like. Journaling is a wonderful strategy for a ton of people. It is not one that I seem to benefit from, but I know a lot of people in my life that journaling daily is a piece of how they just get through life. But also as artistic and creative people, it's really beneficial to them. I kind of wonder if you could take like the novels I'm writing as my journal. Probably not, because I'm not actually writing about myself or my day. But I'm also not sure that you can ever really write or compose anything that doesn't tell some of your story. I'm not sure. That would be something I need to kind of think about for a future video, I guess. Keep notes anytime something inspires you. This is really important and something that's very easy to neglect. And what I mean about this is anytime you have something that excites you but doesn't necessarily create your own idea immediately, like I mentioned earlier, it's still good to write it down. Now, I've done this in the past with a list of notes and, just like I mentioned earlier, but I've done it where like I really like the swords in this story. I really like the way combat's handled here. I really like how they did character development here. I really like what this thing looks like. I played a lot of Warcraft and Blizzard games growing up, and it's influenced a lot of my visual storytelling that I really find compelling, and then bits and pieces of my own in my own artwork. And that's something that nowadays, if I ran into, I would actually be taking notes specifically on like what region, what kind of race, what kind of methodologies for building things. Those things are important. In connection to that, though, I have a series of reference folders on my computer. Actually, they're saved to the cloud so I can access them on any of my devices. But this is just anytime I find a photo that is like, oh man, like this is really cool. I really like the portrait of this person. I really like this set of trees, this landscape, these animals, this whale, because whales are awesome. Then I have those saved in a reference folder. I've got one specifically that is all copyright free stuff, so I feel okay using it for my paintings. But I've got others that are literally just inspiration. I just save things that I find cool and exciting. And they become my reference points for, oh, I want to draw some robots. Let's go look at how these other people did it. This can be a really good thing if you struggle to come up with ideas, because a lot of times ideas are just built on the backs of other ideas. So if you are really into the way that Loish draws, and she's a wonderful artist, if you have a lot of her artwork and other artists' artwork that are similar to hers saved, and so you can look at them and you can kind of create something that is an amalgamation of all that, that's going to put you in a really good spot for coming up with ideas. I also have sketches and thumbnails for paintings and drawings. I do many of these, and this helps give me things to kind of move forward with. So pretty much before I do any piece, I will make a bunch of sketches. And these are kind of like my notes on the bits and pieces of things that inspire me. But it can be very important if you struggle to come up with ideas or you simply want more of them. Start taking notes about the things that excite you. And I do think this is dynamically different than taking notes about potential ideas. This is more like a series of things to revisit. What parts of the last video game you played were super inspiring to you, were super exciting? And if none of it was, then maybe play different video games because we have so little time in our lives that like focus on the things that are exciting. Unless you're using your video games just to detox from your day job, and then, fair enough. That's Monster Hunter for me generally. It was Elden Ring for years, but now we've got a new Monster Hunter game, so that's where my downtime is going. That and the last Pokemon game, actually, which I finally got back into. I wasn't very excited about Sword and Shield, but I'm now diving back into Scarlet and Violet, and actually, I'm going really slow, and I'm kind of enjoying it. I can't say that I'm getting any inspiration out of it, though, frankly. It's mostly just guilty pleasure / downtime at the end of the day after, finishing everything else I need to and all my writing. I keep notes for things storytelling wise that are really exciting. There are pieces of stories I really enjoy. And then there's also things that I'll take notes on, story elements that I don't like how something was handled. So I can hopefully avoid those pitfalls when I go to my own stuff. And I also, like I mentioned earlier, I do lots of recorded audio notes. It's not always just about writing things down. Sometimes it's about drawing them down. Sometimes it's about recording them. For me, a lot of this is if I make sure that I record things in some way, my memory holds on to it better, and I don't often have to go back to those notes, but I remember things better because I put in the effort to record them and put them down. Work on gathering inspiration, though. Not only taking notes about it, but seek out things that inspire you and excite you. This can be going to environments that are different. Think about going to coffee shops and working in them instead when you're trying to come up with ideas. You'll see people there. If you work on any kind of storytelling, which most artists do, you're going to see humans there, and you can copy them. You can build them into your stories. You can start trying to develop what's happening in their brains. Maybe a couple that's having a conversation across the room, you can sit there and be like, wonder what they're talking about. And you can put things into their minds as you're putting your ideas together. Sometimes old bookstores do this for me. I love going and looking at them. They feel archaic in a lot of ways, where I feel like I've gone back into the Middle Ages, but also I get to look at all the books, and there's some inspiration there. Sometimes I just buy too many books, and those are also inspirational. Parks can be this, getting outside in general, making sure that you're shifting your environment a little bit, but you're going somewhere where there's things that can inspire you. I don't think it's unreasonable to throw in here, read books that are inspiring, watch TV that's inspiring, hang out with people that are inspiring. But if you want to come up with better and more ideas, it's a good idea to be around good ideas. There are a lot of wonderful good ideas in our world, in the wilderness. There's a lot of good ideas online, but be careful too with social media. It's so easy to just spend all the time that you have for art making and being creative on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok. Though I've never touched TikTok, but I hear that it's fine. I am coming to that conclusion, though the little old curmudgeon-y man doesn't want to think that it's okay because it's, get off my grass and give me back my chickens. One of my favorite ways to come up with ideas, though, is just slamming two things together. A lot of the prompts that I come up with for the Discord server are simply two unlike things shoved together. This is an easy strategy if you need I have to come up with an idea for something to get me working today. Well, take a toaster and make it a robot. Take a microwave and turn it into a sentient creature. Take a house and put it in space. What needs to change so that you can make that function? Shrink humans down to the size of blades of grass. What is that going to look like? Have a snail grow legs. That sounds really gross. Oh, don't do that. These are just unlike things being shoved together. And this is a really easy strategy to practice coming up with ideas. And this can be done also through random word generators. If you're comfortable using something like ChatGPT, you could go onto that and you could say I am at a loss for ideas, and you could have that thing help you. I think sometimes those AI platforms are kind of fraught with a lot of things, but for coming up with ideas and helping yourself out, I don't know that it's necessarily a terrible thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that down below, because it is something that is starting to become incorporated a little bit more into our society. And I think in contradiction to AI art, that seems to be a little bit less oppressive, a little bit less carnivorous and cannibalistic toward everything else. But I am curious what your thoughts are as well. There are also just a lot of random name generators, random word generators, where you can go and say, give me two nouns, and it will do that. And that's kind of cut from the same cloth, though that is a much older version of that kind of thing. And those can be at the last end of all things. You are just at a loss for coming up with ideas. You don't have any patience. Those kinds of things might be a resource for you. Well, what are my thoughts? I talked about this a lot in this session and in the last one. For me, coming up with ideas is not particularly hard. But I've found over the years, especially after teaching thousands of students, that is a unique quality of me. That doesn't make me special or better than anyone else, and it certainly doesn't mean I have all the secrets. But it means that because I was curious, I spent a lot of time talking to people and trying to help them come up with ideas. And I've tried to encapsulate a lot of that, if we can call it wisdom, here. The goal is to hopefully make it easier for you if you struggle coming up with ideas or you just want to get better at it, giving you some of the things that I've learned and some of the things that I use. I really enjoy coming up with ideas. In fact, it's probably a problem because I get the same dopamine hit out of coming up with new ideas, and that's not the same as actually sitting down and building them out and doing things. Yeah, I talked about this in the last session, but it's, people often confuse coming up with ideas as being the most important thing, and it's really not. I am so happy that I'm writing my novels and actually working on artwork on a regular basis rather than thinking about it and coming up with ideas. The grass is not actually greener on the other side. It looks like it is from afar, but the reality is, if you are like me, you might get trapped in this arena of just perpetually coming up with ideas and never doing anything with them. So wherever you are on this spectrum, I just hope that this has been beneficial to you and that you can start moving forward in a way that is more satisfying to you as an artist. Well, as always, thank you for being here. Thanks for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments down below. Share with me how you come up with ideas. If any of these strategies were helpful for you, it always points me in the right direction and tells me what I can do better to serve you. Thank you to my patrons as well, who are on the screen right now. If you want to check out my Patreon, it is linked in the description down below, along with the Discord server. Well, have a good one, y'all. Good luck coming up with ideas, and I'll see you next time.